It is July 9th, 2018. Time for a monthly project update on P2P VPS. So, some of the accomplishments over this last month. Big sort of milestone or minor milestone is the release of version 1.0.03. So this is semantic versioning, so the number doesn't actually mean anything. This last number is really the only thing that matters. This kind of represents that we're in alpha. These digits will represent that we're in beta, and then this will be the major release versions. And in semantic versioning, it always starts with 1, not 0. So this is current, but what's different about this release is that it's been released for the full suite. So I went through, if you go to the GitHub page, project page, you can see these pinned repositories. So this is the client. This is what you run on a device that you want to rent out. This is the server deployment. This is what you use to deploy new servers. And this is the dashboard. So this is the front end of the server, and this is the back end of the server. And if you go into, so here it is for like the client. But I'll show you how to get to the releases. So you can pick any of these repositories. I'm just going to do the server deployment here and go to the releases. And so these, I'm going to try and stick to this versioning syntax. And the idea is that, version whatever for this should work and have been tested with the same version of the other software. So all three of these have been tested to be compatible and work together for version 1.03. Keeping the full suite of code in different repositories like this, it's easy for one to get out of sync with the other. So by releasing in a version number like this, you know that if you use that version, it will work with the other version of the same version of the other software. Okay, so I think that's pretty clear. So yeah, so that's cool. So if you want to start your own server, you can do so. I recommend you use this release version. If you want to fire up a client, I recommend you do that and also use the same release version. And I've started a test server. So the main server is p2pvps.net. This is the web app that you use to register your client. Register your device, and I've started a secondary server called test.p2pvps.net. So it's subdomain test, and this is where I'm going to test the alpha releases. So the regular server, just p2pvps.net, will get the major releases or the suite releases. Whereas it's going to be a little more Wild West on the test subdomain. Okay, Renewals API is working, but the UI user interface is not working. Let me show you that. So let's see. I just fired up a client here and connected it, and it's connected to the test net, which is not this page, but this page. And so if I go to owned devices, I can see that it is connected. And if I navigate to the store, I can see that there is a listing. There we go. I'm going to try and purchase this. Be sure to use test code testing to drop it down from 3 cents to 1 cent. Okay, looks like it went through. And the listing manager should fulfill it here in a minute. So what I'm doing right now is I'm renting a device, and then I'm going to show you the API for creating a renewal contract. So the user interface is not in place yet. I'm going to show you what it's going to look like in a minute, but this is the API. So if you are comfortable, this is Google Chrome, and I go to More Tools, and developer tools, and then the console tab here. And this is pretty normal if you're a JavaScript developer. Firefox has the same thing. And this is you'd want to bring up the P2P VPS network page, the front end. So use test or use the regular one, and then open this up. So there you can go. You see it's been fulfilled. I'm just going to complete this order. And let's see. I want to go back to the test store. Okay, I can see the listings are gone. Just going to refresh the screen. Okay, there's no listings on the test store. I'm going to call this API. Oops, I need to make sure I have the right device ID in here. And this is going to renew it. And if I refresh the OpenBazaar store, nothing yet, but it might take a minute to propagate. And I'm going to cheat, because I believe yes, I'm already logged in. And I'm just going to check the listing manager. Let's see, fulfilled the order, new rental contract. So that removed it. Docker logs. Let's see, this is going to be yes, server. Renewal generated. Okay, updating contract. So it did generate and it did create the store listing. So I'm just waiting for the information to propagate through the OpenBazaar IPFS network. Okay, so there we go. There's the renewal listing, and see it says renewal, and it says renewal here, and this is a renewal listing. Da 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 da. So the renewals look a little different in that the title is there. And so I'm going to buy the renewal listing. Use code testing again, and pay for it. And then again, wait for the listing manager to fulfill it, which takes about 2 minutes. And what this is going to do is it's going to increase the expiration date of the rental by 24 hours, because that's what the time frame will change later, but right now everything's set up for 24 hours. So now the rental won't they'll sort of self-delete when they hit the expiration date. And so for every time I generate a renewal contract and purchase it, it will move that date up. Now, it's kind of tedious to do it on a daily basis this way. So in the future, when the software is more stable, this will probably be like a week or a month. Device owners will be able to set the time frames that they want to rent at, be it like an hour or a day or a week or a month. And then the renewals will automatically happen that way. So this is just giving you a taste. It's still rough. I'm waiting for this to be fulfilled because I want to show you a small bug that I'm not sure exactly what to do about. There we go. So it's fulfilled. I'm just going to fill this out, and this information is identical to the previous order. So if what's happening here is when you get the fulfillment order, it gives you the port number and the login and password, and so this is identical to the previous owner, and that's the previous order. And so that's just kind of an interesting detail. So what I said earlier is that for every renewal contract you generate, it increases the renewal by 24 hours. So I'm just waiting for this contract to get. But see, there's sort of a problem with the IPFS implementation in OpenBazaar, where the information only propagates, I think, every 10 minutes. The network propagates data. So you can see there's this listing here that my buyer still sees, even though it's actually been deleted. Now I wouldn't be able to purchase this, but yeah, until this goes away, it's sort of misleading. Someone might try to purchase it right away. So that's one problem. I'm going to wait for this to propagate and to go away, and then I'm going to generate a new renewal listing. And the other problem is that if you generate a second renewal listing too quickly, you'll get this error that says, well, basically you'll get the error at the same stage, which see, this one, it says the vendor has no inventory because the listing's been deleted even though the buyer doesn't see it. And the other error is same user interface, but you get a different message, and it just says that like the listing's actually gone because it generates a new listing with a new hash. So it prevents you from. So see that now it's gone, but now if I generate a new renewal listing, which again is going to take a minute or two to possibly up to 10 minutes for the data to propagate. So there's just this slight delay in the user interface, but I'll come back to this. But so renewals are working, and I'm working right now on the user interface so that in the future, what you'll do is you'll come down here to rented devices. And in fact, I'll just give you a sneak peek of the user interface that I've been working on. Let's see, if I go back to my purchases, that's not what I wanted. This one is what I just completed. There's a new piece of information here called -ID, and you can copy that. So I'm kind of skipping ahead. This is I'm currently on the future focus features, which is this -ID. I'm giving you a sneak preview of the user interface, and it's going to seem really non-intuitive at first, but let me explain. So when you get the order fulfillment, a lot of people miss this information, which is a bummer. I might come up with some other way to present it, keep it all in the app so that people who prefer to use this front-end app can use this, and people who prefer to use the OpenBazaar store can use the OpenBazaar store, because the OpenBazaar store has a lot of privacy features that people really like, and so it's important to me that people don't have to use the front-end app. They can just do a rental in the OpenBazaar store. They don't need to go anywhere else. They don't need to use another piece of software. So I'm trying to kind of meet different tastes. But one thing you can do if you do want a nice dashboard that lists all your rentals and all your information, you can copy this -ID, and it's sort of like an API key or on-the-fly password, and hit that, and it's going to retrieve. That's a unique ID. It's just kind of like a password. In fact, it's generated the same way. And then when you come back, it'll populate a little item, a little component with the login information. Same login information here. So rather than going to this sort of clunkier UI, not that this UI is clunky, but for the purposes here, it's a little clunky. Rather than trying to figure out which order you had, this view will load all of the devices that you currently have rented, and this is where the button for renewal will be. So instead of that, you'll just have a button here that says generate renewal. And this will also display the expiration date and give you warnings when you're getting close to your renewal and stuff like that. So this is the first attempts at what the user interface will eventually become. So let's just see if I can generate that other error. So I'm going to follow. There we go. So let's see. I did generate that second renewal. Let's see if I can buy it. yeah, this is the other error message I was talking about. Order contains a hash of the listing that is not currently for sale, because it's still picking up the old listing, which has been deleted and is identical in every way except for the hash. So this second renewal, so I mean, it all works. You just have to give it time. If I just wait for 10 minutes and then hit Control R to refresh, and try again, it will go through, and so it's a little clunky, but it is now possible to generate renewals. So if you want to rent a VPS and renew it for more than 24 hours of rental, you can now do that using the steps, the clunky steps in this video. But the user interface is coming, so stay tuned for that. Also, want to give a big shout out to Brian. That's his handle in our Slack channel. So this is our P2P VPS Slack channel. You can get an invite if you go to p2pvps.org. Go to Community and Slack right there. That'll take you to our Slack channel. And anyways, Brian helped out this weekend by loading a piece of software, or informing me about RancherOS. It's basically an operating system that is a Docker container, and then launches Docker containers. And the very interesting thing about RancherOS is it allows you to run Docker containers inside of Docker containers. And that's something that I didn't know was possible, and I'm really excited to find out that it is possible, and that there's a sweet piece of software that lets you do that and manage Docker containers. Because right now, what you rent when you rent a rental is a Docker container, a command line interface that's running Ubuntu 16.04 inside of a Docker container. But it has a lot of limitations, especially when you're trying to do an apples to apples comparison to like DigitalOcean or Vultr or one of the cloud VPS providers. There's a handful of really irritating limitations to simulating that environment with a Docker container. But if we switch to Rancher, then a person can actually just log into the user interface for Rancher server and then launch any arbitrary Docker container they want inside of a client. So it makes the environment much more flexible, gives the user way more options. So it's going to be a big improvement to this whole idea. And so thank you, Brian, for informing me of Rancher, and thank you for doing some trials, and he did sort of a proof of concept just to prove that you can run all of the different parts of P2P VPS, both the server and the client, in Rancher. So pretty cool. And let's see if there's anything else here. Just showed you the dash ID. Oh, and I wanted to point out that it keeps the process anonymous. So you don't, if you have a device that you want to rent out, what is this? That's not where I want to be. If you have a device you want to rent out, then you have to use this dashboard. I want to point out here that the dashboard's part of the server, but anybody can run a server. So you don't necessarily have to use p2pvps.net. But you have to use this dashboard in order to get your device ID, in order to register your device. But as a renter, you do not have to use this user interface, and I want to keep it that way going forward. Ideally, people should just be able to rent a device and get their login information and use it. And I'm not exactly sure how that impacts renewals, because renewals are sort of outside this. I may have a shell command that you can use within the rental to generate a renewal, because I like this idea. I've designed this user interface to maintain as much privacy as possible. To create a user account, I mean, it can be anything. You don't even need an email in order to access this. I want to keep it as privacy respecting as possible. And so that, and I also like OpenBazaar because it's very privacy respecting. You can use this with Tor, so like to log in here, you just try some random username and password, and it's going to tell you, okay, it failed. So you can hit this create account, and then now you just again can put in whatever you want. It helps if you remember what you just typed. But there, so I just created a new account, and I'm off and running, and I can add a device, and I can subscribe the device, and again, like I said, I don't actually need this user interface to rent a device. I can do everything through the OpenBazaar user interface. So renewals are the first sort of feature to kind of throw a wrench in that concept. But I'm going to try hard to maintain this idea of privacy and anonymity and permissionlessness, because besides just preserving privacy, permissionlessness is efficient. It's much, much more efficient. If you can give a piece of computer software, an application, a Bitcoin wallet, and put some money in that wallet, and then run that application, and then that application can autonomously spin up VPSs and pay for them, and then take control of them, and I mean that's a very powerful idea, and the only way you get to that idea is by having a permissionless server system, and that's what I'm building. That's what P2P VPS is going to be. It's going to be permissionless. And so the privacy respecting features are awesome, but there's also a very practical business case to keep things private and permissionless. And so trying to kill two birds with one stone there. And and then there's this fun little thing that I created. So Raspberry Pis, or something that's kind of gaining popularity right now, is the Mint box. I just bought one. It's like a $400 laptop shrunk into a footprint, not much bigger than a Raspberry Pi, but you have 8 to 16 gigs of RAM and an Intel processor, and it's not a Raspberry Pi. It's a laptop in a tiny can. And anyways, I got one. They're great, but the problem with these IoT devices is you typically don't, you might hook them up to a keyboard, mouse, and a monitor at some point, but they typically don't. That's not how they live. They don't typically live connected to a monitor. And that's a problem when you're connecting it to, and this totally applies to Raspberry Pis. It's a problem when you're bouncing around and connecting it to a LAN, because you need to get your IP address. Pretty critical. And if you don't have a monitor and a keyboard to look that up, it can get pretty tricky, especially if you don't have access to the router, where you can just look up the IP address. Anyways, I've been hunting around for a project that basically tweets my local IP address, and I wasn't able to find exactly what I wanted, so I just created it. So if you go to github.com, this is my profile, Chris Troutner, one word. And go to my repositories. I have this tweet local IP, and it's just a Node application. Let me see if I can show you what it looks like. So I use PM2, and if you don't know what that is, you should definitely look it up. So I'm just going to. So here's my IoT device, and here I've got this running. In fact, I believe I have a link in here to PM2 right there inside the repository. But it loads at boot time with PM2, and if you follow the link to this post, this will explain kind of how to hook it up. I need to do a better installation, or better installation guide. But you basically create a config file that looks like this. You copy this file and you fill in this information that Twitter gives you when you create an account. And here you can see the account I created for my little. It's called a Fitlet, is the computer, but they're marketing it as the Mint box. But anyways, when the thing boots, it tries to connect to the internet like a normal laptop would. And if it's within range of a Wi-Fi connection that it's connected to, it will automatically connect. It doesn't need any manual intervention for that. But I still don't necessarily know what the IP address is of the device unless I hook it up to a monitor and keyboard and mouse. So what it does is it waits like a minute or two after it boots up to let the Wi-Fi connect properly, and then the Node application queries its internal IP address. So not the IP address, not the internet accessible IP address. That's the WAN IP, the local IP address of your local Wi-Fi router that has been assigned to this device. So it's pretty safe to tweet because you can't like use that IP address to do anything malicious from the wide internet. Like you have to be in the local internet for that thing to be valuable in any way. It's relatively safe to tweet out, and so it just automatically connects to the internet and then tweets its local IP. So I just go to the Twitter feed, and now I know the IP address of the device, and I can connect to it over SSH. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, I applaud you for making it this far into the video. If you do know what I'm talking about, you can probably see the value in this. So yeah, feel free to fork it, use it, do whatever you want to do with it. And let's see. Okay, yeah, this is that concludes the project update for July. Full speed ahead. Expect to see the renewal user interface and rental monitoring user interface implemented this next month.